Well, Sumit, thank you very much. When I'm starting this panel, I'm in a bit of a dilemma. And the reason why I'm in a bit of a dilemma is because Karan lives in the same building I am. Should I start with him? Anand and me share the same name, which is Dalmia. So Khandan ek hai. So should I start with him? Or should I go back to Mr. Khara, whom I know from 20 years as a financial commentator, as a journalist? So I'll keep it very simple so that we don't get into any, any relationships and complications. I'll start with Anand. Anand, let's understand the business which you represent. Today's investor is checking the NAVs not on a monthly basis, but on a daily basis. Especially when you see wealth declining, especially when you see gold is outperforming equities. What is the broad messaging? It's all good to think long term, preach and talk about long term, but when you have pain in the short term, how do you convince them to bear the pain?
It's a situation that every investor faces. All of us like to see green on a daily basis. No one likes to see their portfolio in red. But the reality is that if you're chasing returns, you have to have risk along with it. Even one of the things that we've done with our investors is try and educate in terms of the tenure for investing at the time when they're making the investment. We are trying to understand their requirements when they're trying to invest. So we look upon as the current situation as an opportunity rather than a situation wherein you get perturbed with negative returns that you see on your portfolio. I think all of us believe that India would be a 5 trillion economy, and if that happens, equities will do well. So continuously keep them updated, make them aware, calm their nerves. I think it's very important to over communicate with your customers in these times, so that they realize that this pain is short-lived. It happens, and it has happened in the past. But as it happened in the past, it will also go away. So I wish I had a magic wand and always show them green. But it's important for us to make them understand that look, this is part of equity investing, and it's very important for them to be calm, patient, and stay for the long term. I think there is no secret sauce to making money in the long term.
Karan, when parallels have been drawn by IMF that this is the worst crisis in last 100 years, parallels have been drawn, the price action smacks of what we saw in 2008. How do you convince investors, both in the debt market and the equity market, when you see a debacle in any other mutual fund, to stay calm, stay patient, and not worry about their investment?
So honestly, Nikunj, this time around compared to 2008, I think investors are much more smarter and also better placed. I think for starters, at least in the high net worth market, the quantum of leverage in 2020 is dramatically a very small percentage of what it was in 2008. We're coming off a cycle of 2 years where, generally speaking, mid caps have not done too well. Post ILFS, we also had a bit of a credit crisis already. So I think a lot of client portfolios got positioned slightly better over the last 18 months, thanks to the mid caps not performing well for the last 18 months and ILFS giving everybody a bit of a shock 18 months back. Both put together, I think relatively client portfolios were better positioned. Having said that, credit funds obviously has led to a bit of loss in customer confidence, because suddenly what you believed was available 48 to 72 hours from the point you did redemption. You always believed you were taking market risk, but the delay in redemption causes a little bit more stress. So overall, I don't see crazy panic, but yes, people don't want to be unnecessarily aggressive. They don't want to be opportunistic. They want the cloud to clear. They want to stay on the sidelines and cautiously allocate money once things are clearer. So no extreme panic, but stay safe and cautious rather than be opportunistic.
Mr. Khara, you wear a couple of hats. So let me first ask Dinesh Khara, the banker. You are in a perfect position to tell us where the economy is doing. If economy does well, earnings will do well. If earnings will do well, markets will also do well. Given that right now there is a credit squeeze, banks are criticized not for lending. How can one be bullish on the economy and on the health of financial markets when we know the wheels are reversing?
Thanks, Nikunj, for putting a question which is probably being asked every minute and every hour in today's economic scenario. But the fact of the matter is that banks, it is not a situation where banks are not lending. It is a situation where there are, I would say that there are situations where when the borrowers are not borrowing, They have got the sanctioned limits, but they are not availing those limits. So naturally, when the wheel of economy has come to a grinding halt, naturally, no entrepreneur would like to take the interest cost on their books. So that is a kind of a scenario which we have witnessed. And I would say that this kind of a scenario we have seen for almost of course, now post-COVID, this is a reality. But before that also, I would say that from the second half of the last financial year, we did started seeing some kind of a recovery in the credit offtake, and which got pronounced in the last quarter, which is January-March quarter. But thereafter, suddenly in the last fortnight of March, we had seen this outbreak of COVID, and that actually has led to a situation where the economy has actually come to a grinding halt. So I would say that even today, when we look at our corporate credit book, we have got a situation where we have sanctioned the limits, but corporates are not availing. And today, I think the general tendency on the part of corporate is that you have to stay liquid, you have to secure all your lines, and as and when the economy starts kicking, I'm sure they want to ensure that they are not left out with this scenario where liquidity is a constraint. So I actually perceive that this is a scenario like that. So I think considering the fact that yesterday and today large announcements have been made, the announcement made by the Honorable Finance Minister today are quite reassuring, and particularly addressing the segments of the economy which are the worst affected, the MSME, the discoms, and also when it comes to contractors. So I think practically all the major sub-segments of the economy which are the worst affected, their concerns have been addressed. I'm sure once the lockdown gets relaxed, it will be a very positive scenario for the economy. And actually, if I can visualize the scenario, I would expect something like a V shape of the recovery, because there's a lot of pent-up demand which is there in the economy. And as soon as people have an assurance of the job and people have an assurance of the positive economic activity, it will give a reassurance to the consumers, and it will lead to some kind of a V shape of the recovery. That's what my expectation is.
Looking at the fact, Mr. Khara, the LTRO2 did not see a resounding success. NBFC currently are in a difficult scenario because mutual funds are not lending to them. Mutual funds are getting outflows. Do you think the crunch for next 6-12 months could be harder, and it's going to be a long winter before we see light at the end of the tunnel? So I'm with you when you say that things will improve, but it's about figuring out it's a year, 6 months, or it's more than a year.
When it comes to NBFC sector, it's a very large number of NBFCs are present in that sector. But if you really look at the concentration of wages in the NBFCs, I would say that a major concentration of the wages is with the top 20 NBFCs, and they are in a position to raise money through the bank and also through various money market instruments. So I think that today's announcement will actually help us in reaching out to NBFCs which are lower grade, and also where in fact I would actually admit that when it comes to MFIs, when we are trying to spot the MFIs whose paper we can buy, we could not really find many. And so that is the kind of a scenario which we have witnessed. And when it comes to the smaller NBFCs, all of them are not raising money through the market instruments. Many of them are raising money through the loan structures also. So I think as far as banking system is concerned, we were always willing to help those NBFCs either through buying out their portfolios or by offering loans. So I think as such, there is no such challenge for the NBFC sector. We have been supporting them. And going forward, this measure which has been announced, if at all there were certain NBFCs whose paper were actually got downgraded in the recent past, who are not finding enough buyer for their paper, they will be in a position to create liquidity for the paper. And in the whole system, maybe the mutual fund, maybe the banks also, they will be in a position to monetize those papers, and it will create enough liquidity for such papers also.
Okay, Karan, This question is coming your way. Over the years, Karan, we've interacted. You've always been a big proponent of two things: asset allocation and risk. So let's understand how the stacks are favored right now, because the new normal, Karan, is risk and volatility are back and they're here to stay. So how do you define the whole matrix for us now, Karan?
I think asset allocation is undoubtedly the main key for any client's portfolio. I think the determination of return, nearly 80 to 85% comes out of asset allocation. 15 to 20% would come out of instrument selection, and potentially 5 to 7% out of timing. For asset allocation, I think the biggest metric we look at effectively becomes price to book and price to earnings. Very simplistically put, obviously the world's not as simple as what I'm going to say, but very simplistically, a P band of 17 to 20 on forward earnings and a price to book, in a commensurate range are more or less where the markets end up trading 75 to 80% of the time. From an asset allocation perspective, let's say north of 20 times, we are always in a slight reduction mode. South of 17 times, we are always in an addition mode. You'll never get it absolutely right. Markets can go down to 10, 11, 12 times. It can also go up to 27, 28 times. But to cut out the volatility, these kind of measures are required. And as I said, 80 to 85% is between this range. So allocate your assets differently between equity and fixed income, only potentially once or twice in a couple of years. But it's important to do that, because if you do not do that, the volatility in the portfolio will be so high that even though the result at the end of the tunnel is positive, we might not be able to survive the journey where we need a massive appetite to see a lot of ups and downs. So I think volatility is the most important feature of the client's portfolio. It obviously can be done and adjusted a little bit with timing, a little bit between fixed income, equity, as well as real estate. Most of our clients would have 50 to 60% in fixed income, 20 to 35% in equity, and 4 to 5% real estate. I think all put together, constant number of 10 to 12% is what you aim at. And if done consistently with low volatility, helps you double money in 6 to 7 years.
The matrix which you mentioned, Karan, some would argue that they work in a normal environment where interest rates, they follow a pattern, inflation, it follows a pattern, when global liquidity follows a pattern. In this unprecedented new normal reboot, do you think the way you allocate capital for some of the people who are watching the show and perhaps seek your guidance and your understanding will also change?
I don't think so. I think so let's take an example of 100 rupees, okay? And let's assume the client has an allocation of 50% in equity and 50% in fixed income. I will for a minute leave aside fixed income. I'm assuming there the allocation is relatively simpler. A certain percentage in AAA, a certain percentage in government, sovereign, and a certain percentage in AA plus and below. Okay, those would be the three classifications. On the equity portion of 50 rupees, I'm again making it really simple, but if let's say the allocation band is defined as 17 to 20, if the markets do cross 20 times, you will come down from your 50 rupees, okay, to a maximum allocation of 25 to 30. Means that if the market keeps going 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, you will keep taking off 5 rupees off the table. So theoretically, let's go back to 2007, the markets were close to 26, 27 times. You would have been allocated 25 rupees out of 100 rupees instead of 50 rupees in your equity portfolio. So you might feel extremely bad between 20 times to 28 times because you're booking out profits much earlier than what is required. Similarly, on the south side, you'll never get the timing absolutely right. Markets came off to around about 10 to 11 times from 17 times. You would have started adding a bit to equity from south of 17 all the way potentially to 11, 12. You would have averaged at 14, 15, but eventually after 2, 3 years, you would have been much, much better off. So I think you'll have to follow a process. Does it mean if you're adding some money at 15 times, it's going to be the lowest point? The answer is no. Nobody knows what the lowest point is. It was 9 times last time. This time it can be 7 times, 11 times, 12 times. And similarly, nobody knows what's the highest point. And if you wait for the highest point and lowest point to get out and get in, I think none of us will ever get it right. So all we have to follow is a very, very tight process and discipline. And sometimes if you write it down and follow something what we call as an investment portfolio mandate, I think it will help achieve many, many better results.
You brilliantly articulated it for us. Like they often say in stock markets, that tops and bottoms are either for fools or for liars. Anand, I'm going to draw your attention to the topic of the portfolio, which is the importance of fund selection. I've seen some of your work. It involves deep analysis. It involves taking a deep dive into the AMCs and the portfolios and do ratio analysis. In this time, when everything is helter-skelter, there is no new normal. Definition of investment has really changed. What is your deep dive in fund selection indicating?
I think it's a very interesting question. See, given that our business is more digital and we don't have the luxury of meeting our customers face to face that often, though we try and call them, it's very important for us in the first place is to, try and understand the risk appetite of the customer. Once we understand the risk appetite of the customer and the investment need in terms of the tenure for which the customer needs, or the end goal for which he's investing, accordingly, we try and suggest the fund. Also, the fact that we work with a lot of PSU banks as their partner, a lot of our customers are first-time investors to mutual funds. So our desire is not to make them the highest return. Our desire is to make them the highest return on a risk-adjusted basis. So these were erstwhile FD investors who were trying to come to mutual funds for the first time, trying to get a return higher than inflation. So we always try and first do, as Karan said, even for an SIP, we try and do an asset allocation depending on the risk profile. Secondly, because these are first time guys. Secondly, we always try and stay on the large diversified equity funds. So idea would be to look at a large AMC in the first place. Secondly, try and see if depending on the age and the risk of the customer, try and give him a balanced advantage fund or a fund which has a good asset allocation of debt and equity. And the third is, try and not become very adventurous and keep it to large, diversified equity funds. So we follow this very, very simple method to make sure that our customers are making a few percentage points higher than, the fixed deposit returns, but, also make sure that they don't see a sharp correction on the portfolio in the short term. So we keep it very simple and try and be more conservative so that our customers get used to this asset class and then take them from there.
So, Anand, the definition of equity return is often considered to be risk-free return plus a premium to that, because with volatility, you always take a risk, or you take a risk because of volatility. Inflation is going to remain low. Globally, interest rates are coming down. So for this decade, what to your mind should be the expected return expectations? Because the question which I often feel is being, in a sense, asked by everyone is that keep your return expectations down. So is it time to reset that now for equities at least?
Look, I think equity returns are always a function of what FD rates are, right? Frankly, at a very, very simplistic level. So when FD rates come down, I think our expectation of equity return should also come down. As a rule of thumb, we always like to say that, equity return should be somewhere in the range of 2x your FD returns. Because, as you said, the perception of risk is there, and the risk-free return, compensates for the risk that you're taking. The risk above the risk-free return basically compensates for the risk that you're taking. So we try and say that, look, in the current environment where FD returns are somewhere in the 5 to 5.5% range, equity returns, rather than the 14-15% that, we were pitching a few years back, I think is more in the range of 10 to 12% now. Just given where, inflation rate is, where interest rates are, I think equity is more around 10 to 12% is more realistic. And that's what we try and communicate to our investors.
I'm going to go back to Mr. Khara. And Mr. Khara, I would have, I'm avoiding on purpose questions on State Bank of India. Well, there is a lot of curiosity that why State Bank of India is at 160 rupees despite the subsidies. We'll keep that, conversation for some other time. But Mr. Khara, when you see a reboot in the economy, you will always see the biggest and the strongest guys will survive. The most adaptable companies will move forward, and the ones which are not changing will become part of, fossil, or they will become extinct. So throw more light on us that in terms of your understanding of how the corporate culture, the reboot and the reignition, if it is happening, where it is happening.
See, the way I look at it practically, all the large corporates are revisiting and actually examining in a very comprehensive manner what are the impact of the COVID, and they are actually working on various multiple scenarios. So the one who are doing all such exercise, they are actually trying to be ahead of the curve when it comes to rearranging their business models. So I think the companies are where the the management is progressive, where the management is forward-looking, where the management acknowledges the kind of risk which the COVID and the post-COVID has really unfolded. I think they are the one which we feel that they will be in a position to readjust themselves fast, and those who have conserved the cash well, and those who are nimble enough to adjust their cost. So I think these are the kind of corporates which we feel would be in a position to readjust in the shortest possible time. And also the entities which have got some kind of a diversified risk as in their portfolio. So that if at all it's a group entity, group of companies which have got exposure into various kind of industries, which are the commodities, which are the FMCGs and stuff like that. So I think they are the one which I feel that they would be in a position to recover fastest. Again, today's announcement and the kind of focus which Honorable Prime Minister has given for infrastructure creation, we were always very apprehensive about some of the construction companies, but I think it will probably give a lease of life to such kind of construction companies too, who are managing themselves well. So I think I would say that the kind of focus which has been brought in by the government in the yesterday's and the today's announcement, this has actually, it will again push us back to the drawing board to figure out that which all industries will have a revival path, and they will be on a quick revival. But again, if at all there are corporates where there are concerns about the management practices, they perhaps may find it difficult to recover the post-COVID situation in the shortest possible time. So that's how I really visualize the scenario. And I think it is irrespective of the size, not necessarily that it has to be the large corporates only. I would say that some of the MSMEs also who are nimble, who are progressive, who are aligned to the market situation, even there also I would expect the recovery to be faster.
A simple question, and then I'll go to Karan and Anand to get the understanding, because they understand the debt market. As the biggest bank of India, which is State Bank of India, Mr. Khara, do you think that we could be in for a fresh NPA cycle, or you think those fears are slightly overdone?
As far as the corporate is concerned, we have adequate provisions we have already made. I would not absolutely deny this fact, but at the same time, what I would like to mention is that our ability to handle the NPA cycle at an early stage, that is something which we have now acquired the requisite skills, so that I think though for a quarter or so, we might get to see some kind of NPA build-up, but I think we are quite geared up to handle that kind of a situation, and we should have the collection machinery. We have got very strong collection machinery. We should be in a position to have the recoveries in place. And I think it might be, we might see some aberration for maximum for a quarter, but we should be in a position to handle it well.
Okay. Karan, what's been your biggest challenge managing this kind of an environment? Because your clients are ultra HNI clients. Their understanding of economy, markets, and perhaps companies is far deeper than, let's say, an ordinary retail investor. So what are you trying to communicate to them and indicate to them? Because Karan, only in hindsight we'll figure out, like 2008, is 2020 a great buying opportunity or not? When 2008 crisis happened, trust me, it was a very difficult period to navigate.
I think three things I can think of the fly, and I think the first and the most important thing is communicate and stay in touch. I think as all of us, when we're faced with difficult situations and we see lots of ups and downs in the portfolio, I think the most important thing is to communicate and constantly be in touch. I think that goes a long way in trying to reassure clients. Second, I think wherever there is an excess, okay, for whatever set of reasons, the excess could be either because you took too much credit risk, the excess could be because of leverage, or the excess just could be on account of the asset allocation having gone wrong. I think there will be opportunities over the next 3 to 6 months. There will be some times when markets will be looking slightly better. it's a good time to correct the excesses. Okay, so I think it's going down to the brass level and ensuring if there's any flab anywhere, in the first given opportunity, ensure that you are able to cut the flab. Third, like I said earlier, discipline is going to be most important. Okay, stick to your written investment discipline. Constantly check it, challenge yourself, and if you feel like doing something which seems very, very attractive, and you feel that you will never get this opportunity ever again, so you should put in everything you have into it. Just go back to that sheet and ensure that you're disciplined and you don't believe that this is the last opportunity where you'll get everything. So I think it's extremely important to be disciplined. Nothing will change tomorrow to the extreme where everything will be available for 1 paisa, and nothing's also going to change to the extreme where everything will become super expensive tomorrow. So I think we have to walk a tight rope, stay disciplined, be very, very communicative, explain all the ups and the downs, and at the same point, cut all the flaps. I think these are the three main sets of communications I can think to our clients.
And then there are a couple of type of clients. One who've invested, let's say, before 2008. I'm sure they will use this decline to buy more because they have been rewarded because of the 2008 experience. Then there are ones who came, let's say, post the crisis, which is in 2010 or 11. They may be confused. But how are you advising and what are you telling your clients who've come in last 2 years or in last 1 year, where they've seen a straight line decline and a vertical fall in their investments?
Look,
I think it's massive.
Yeah, Karan, why don't you answer this? Then I'll go to Anand with this.
Okay. So I think it becomes massively, it's unfortunately or fortunately not as much as a straight line like that, right? Because typically saying there are two kinds of clients, one who's kind of got 50 to 60 rupees in fixed income and 40 rupees in equity. More or less over the last 2 years, his return on the portfolio is flat. Okay, so he's made nothing at all. He's more or less sitting at a zero return. The 60 rupees of equity, fixed income has grown by around about 12 rupees. His 40 rupees of equity is down by around about 20 to 30%. His portfolio is back at par. Okay, he's not happy with the portfolio, but at the same point, he's not losing sleep over it. The second kind of portfolio individual is a person who's put his entire 100 rupees into equities. For us, those set of clients will be very few. But if there is a client like that, he would be down 25-30%. And I think clients more or less get it. This time at least, I'm not seeing panic to say, let me get out. And I will never see another day where the value of this portfolio will be 100 again. At the same point, I'm not seeing a desperation to say that let me take out everything else I have in terms of savings and put it in again. So I think overall, clients are maintaining their composure and calm. We are also working very hard with them to ensure that no irrational decision either on disinvestment or on investment is taken.
Anand, the same question to you as well.
So Nikunj, I would say this time we are slightly blessed, with the ability of social media and digital, because your ability to stay in touch with your clients is much higher. The ability to increase awareness of your clients is much higher to show that look, this happens every decade. The market cycles happen every decade, and we are trying to present this as an opportunity to them. Again, as I said, we are slightly lucky. Most of our clients are SIP clients. And the very purpose of SIP is to basically, use the current opportunity to, further average your portfolio. So, I think given that, we have access to digital means to be in touch with our customers, I think we're finding it slightly easier. I think, also the industry, has taken a lot of, I would say, proactive measures to educate the customers. So be it AMCs, be it SEBI, AMFI, various industry intermediaries, everyone has gone out of their way to make sure that customers understand that this does not stay forever. It's a matter of time. Equity is long-term investing anyways. So it's a good time for them to accumulate more. And if they have excess capital, maybe not a bad time to increase their SIPs. So I think, we've not found it that difficult. I think the industry numbers are also showing. So you saw the SIP book for April was almost as good as March. So I think, we've not faced a steep decline or too much issues from the clients. In fact, we are seeing clients using the opportunity to increase their allocation to equity.
So, Anand, we both are Marwadis, and in Marwadis, they say that Sali Adi Gharwali hoti hai. Now, my sister-in-law last week showed me a graph where, according to her analysis, gold and Nifty has given the same return in last 10 years. I can argue with my wife, but what do I tell my sister-in-law?
All I can say is that, look, at a moment of time, anything can, the data point, if you look at just 10 years today, but if she would have looked at this graph, 6 months before, I don't think the same thing would have stacked up. So I would say, I was an investment banker earlier. So, we're all good at presenting data, and there are certain points in time when certain data gets presented in a certain way while the correlation is not so high. So I think, you can say that, look, gold is not a bad asset class. I'm not saying it's a bad asset class, but by definition, I think equity over a period of time will beat gold in terms of returns. So yeah, if you would, this is just a moment in time probably when it's happening.
Karan is very composed, smiling, which means he already has answered that difficult question which his sister-in-law must have asked. So Karan, how did you handle this? Gold versus Nifty in last 10 years?
No, I think in some senses, Anand's answered it extremely well. You can't look at anything at a point. And even if you want to look at it at a point, you look at the number of observations, right? So on the rolling time period, if you take, let's say, 100 observations, there would be at least 92, 93 observations, whereas on an excess of 5-year period, equity is beating gold. So your probability of getting excess return is on betting on the 90% observations and not on the 10% observations. Because to get the 10% right, you'll have to be practically Nostradamus and invest only in those period of observations, which is going to be really difficult. So I think 9 out of 10 observations over a 5-year rolling period and excess will have equities doing better than gold. And, we all have to believe that we'll be better off betting on the 9 rather than betting on the 1.
Mr. Khara is smiling. He says, you guys are just fighting between gold and equities. Come to State Bank of India. The fixed deposits are the best. You never lose money. Right, Mr. Khara?
No, well, Nikunj, I have, of course, currently at the bank, but I have also been in the AMC. So, but I very firmly believe that there is a reason for having allocation into all the asset classes. Maybe sometime some asset performs well, other time others will perform well. So I think a balanced distribution would be something which should be the ideal.
But in terms of value,
that will of course depend upon the risk appetite which every individual has got it.
Karan, I'm asking my next, last question, which perhaps would have a lot of technical nuance to it. But based on the matrix which you follow, which is price to book and PE, what does this market remind you of? Does this remind you of 2000, 2008 or 2013? What is your sense, Karan?
I think it's too quick to take a firm decision on that, Nikunj. I think it's really, really difficult. And I think we are in early stages yet. So it's in some senses like a question whether the recovery will be a V-shaped recovery or a W-shaped recovery. I think extremely difficult to make up your mind on that yet. We'll have to see how globally corporates recover. I think if I was to assign a probability, which is the best I can do because defining an outcome is virtually impossible. I would actually assign less than a 20% probability of this being a V-shaped recovery. I think the pain is a little here longer to stay. I think with or without COVID, I think the valuations was a little stretched. COVID is definitely one of the reasons why we've seen a large correction, but it's not the only reason. I think valuations were already stretched. Liquidity has been in excess abundance for the last 3 to 4 years. And I think this correction may take a longer time to kind of get healed and correct itself. And corporate performance will also take a little bit longer than 2-3 months. So I think I would put a less than 20% probability for a V-shaped recovery. A W-shaped recovery, potentially another 20-30%. But more or less, I think a U-shaped recovery today would be the largest probability. And I think 40 to 50% chance that you'll have a placid 12 to 18 months and then a more stronger recovery.
Well, gentlemen, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for at least Anand telling me a tip that next time when my sister-in-law is asking a difficult question, how can I actually handle it? So I think more than anything else, thank you for that tip. And it was lovely interacting with all three of you. Thank you for your wonderful time.
Thanks, Nitin.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.